My name's Peter, I'm 29, and until recently I thought I had a pretty normal family. Maybe a little passive-aggressive, but nothing too wild. I'm the youngest of three kids, the one who worked my way through college, started a decent career, and saved up enough to buy my own place. It wasn't a mansion or anything, just a small but nice house that I could actually call mine. To me, it was proof that all those late nights and sacrifices were worth it. To my family, apparently, it was a flashing sign that said, Peter thinks he's better than us now. The first sign that things were shifting came a few months after I moved in. I'd invite my parents and sister over for dinner every so often, but no one ever accepted. There was always an excuse. Dad was tired, Mom was busy, my sister Emily had plans. At first, I didn't think much of it. Families get busy. I figured eventually they'd want to come see the place and we'd laugh about how long it took. But as time went on, the vibe changed. Calls with my mom became more pointed. You know, she'd say in that clipped tone of hers, we never see you anymore. You don't even ask us how we're doing unless I call you first. Dad started chiming in with sarcastic jokes about how my new life must be very glamorous. Emily, who's 2 years older than me and has never really approved of anything I do, liked to make snide comments about my perfect house on the family group chat. At first, I laughed them off, but it kept escalating. By the time we were sitting down to Sunday dinner at my parents' house, the first one I'd been invited to in months, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. It started with Mom snapping, "You never invite us over. Maybe you're hiding something." She said it like she was accusing me of running an illegal operation in my living room, not just living my life. Dad gave a smug little smirk and added, "Or maybe he just thinks he's too good for this family now." Emily rolled her eyes dramatically, stabbing at her salad like it had personally offended her. "He probably spends all his money on himself anyway," she muttered, not even bothering to lower her voice. I felt my ears heat up as I set my fork down. I hadn't been expecting an ambush. For a second, I debated just brushing it off, changing the subject. That's what I usually did. Let it roll off me, avoid rocking the boat. But something in me had shifted over the last few months. I was tired of being made to feel guilty for finally getting ahead. I looked around the table at them. My mom with her accusatory stare, my dad half smirking like this was all a game, my sister with that smug little tilt to her chin, and I realized they were all waiting for me to defend myself. They wanted me to justify why I had a house, why I wasn't over there every weekend fixing their leaky faucets and listening to their drama. For once, I didn't want to justify anything. "Actually," I said, and my voice came out calmer than I felt, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. Dad leaned back, arms crossed, like he was settling in for some big revelation he could turn into a punchline later. Emily gave a soft snort under her breath, already skeptical. My mom's brow furrowed, like she wasn't sure if she wanted to hear whatever was about to come out of my mouth. My hand went to my jacket pocket, where I'd been carrying a letter for weeks now. A letter that, if I was honest, I hadn't fully decided what to do with until this moment. The room went very still. Even the sound of the old grandfather clock in the living room felt loud. I let the silence stretch for a beat, my heart thudding in my chest. Whatever was about to happen, I knew it was going to change the tone of this dinner. Maybe even the tone of my relationship with my family, forever. The silence stretched for what felt like a full minute, though I'm sure it was only a few seconds. My mom finally broke it with that sharp, skeptical tone she uses when she thinks I'm about to say something stupid. "What is it, Peter? If this is about you being too busy to visit, I think we've heard enough excuses already." I almost laughed, partly from nerves and partly because her assumption was so perfectly on brand. "No, Mom," I said lightly. "I'm not about to announce I've joined a secret society that bans family contact." Although, I let the sentence hang just long enough for Emily to roll her eyes again. "I guess if I had, you'd have just solved the mystery of the year." Dad chuckled under his breath, but not in a friendly way, more like he was enjoying the idea of me being roasted at the table. "So dramatic," he said, spearing another piece of roast beef. "Just say whatever it is and stop making a scene." That was the thing about my family. I was always the one making a scene, even when I wasn't. Growing up, if Emily and I fought, it was somehow my fault because I was supposed to be the peacemaker. If I wanted to stay home and study instead of going to a cousin's birthday party, I was antisocial. If I spoke up about something unfair, I was disrespectful. And now, here I was again, the problem at the dinner table, when all I'd done was exist. I didn't pull out the letter yet. Instead, I tucked my hand back into my lap and gave them my best I'm about to enjoy this smirk. You know what? I said, leaning back in my chair. I think I'll save it for a minute. It's way more fun watching everyone guess. Emily made a sound halfway between a scoff and a laugh. Let me guess, she said. You're moving somewhere even farther away, so you'll have an excuse to never show up to anything again. Close, I said, grinning. But no. Try again. New car. Dad said. Because that would explain why you've been avoiding us. You probably don't want to give anyone a ride. I put a hand over my heart. Wow, Dad. That's exactly it. I've been sitting in my new sports car all weekend just thinking, how can I avoid giving my family free Uber rides? You caught me. Even Mom cracked a reluctant smile at that, but it faded quickly. Peter, this isn't a joke. We're worried about you. You never come around anymore. You never ask about your sister. You don't tell us what's going on with you. That's not normal. I wanted to say, what about all the times I asked you guys to come over and you said no? But I bit it back. Instead, I just said, maybe I was waiting until I had something really interesting to share. You know, build some suspense. Keep the ratings high. That got another eye roll from Emily. You act like your life is a TV show, she said. Newsflash, nobody's watching. I smiled sweetly at her. And yet, here you are, front row seat. Must be a slow news day. Her glare could have melted steel. If I had to rank Emily's favorite activities, one-upping Peter would be in the top 3. Ever since we were kids, it had always been a competition. Her grades versus mine, her friends versus mine, her life versus mine. And if she didn't come out on top, she'd find a way to drag me down to her level. I could feel that same old sibling rivalry creeping into the air now, like smoke filling the room. Dad must have sensed it too, because he leaned forward and said, you know, Peter, your sister's right. It wouldn't hurt you to spend less time on yourself and more time with family. We're not saying you have to give us all your money, but… Hold up, I said, raising a hand. Did anyone here ask me for money? Or are we just skipping ahead to the part where I'm apparently Scrooge McDuck swimming in gold coins while you all suffer? Don't be dramatic, Mom said sharply. We're just saying you could do more. More than what? I asked. More than inviting you over repeatedly and getting turned down? More than working 60-hour weeks so I can actually afford the house I'm supposedly too proud of? More than helping Dad with the lawn last summer, even though I was exhausted? Remind me what the baseline for enough is here, because clearly I missed the memo. That earned me a heavy sigh from Mom, which is her version of dropping the mic. Dad just shook his head like I was being unreasonable, which made me want to laugh again. Emily, of course, couldn't resist adding fuel to the fire. You know what this is really about, she said, her voice all sugary sweet. He just doesn't want us to see his house because it's probably nicer than Mom and Dad's, and he doesn't want them to feel bad. That's what this is, right? Big shot Peter doesn't want to rub it in. Ah, yes, I said, clapping my hands together. You cracked the code. My life's mission has been revealed. Step 1, buy a house. Step 2, refuse to let my family cross the threshold so they can live in eternal jealousy. Step 3, profit. Dad rolled his eyes, clearly done with the banter. You think you're funny, he said, but it's sad, really. You've changed since you moved out. You used to be part of this family. Now you're just separate. That one hit harder than I expected. Because in a way, he was right. I had changed. I wasn't the same kid who quietly accepted being the scapegoat just to keep the peace. I wasn't the one who stayed silent when something was unfair. I wasn't even the one who bent over backwards to prove my worth to them anymore. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at each of them, feeling that familiar mix of frustration and sadness rising in my chest. And under it all, there was something else too, resolve. I finally reached into my pocket and pulled out the letter. It was just a plain white envelope, but as soon as I put it on the table, everyone's eyes locked on it like it was radioactive. Since everyone is so curious about what I've been up to, I said lightly, I guess now's as good a time as any. Emily leaned forward, curiosity written all over her face despite herself. What is that? She asked. You'll see, I said, sliding it toward the center of the table but not opening it yet. But maybe finish dinner first. I'd hate for anyone to choke. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Peter, stop playing games. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Who said I'm playing? The tension was so thick now you could practically taste it. And honestly, for the first time all evening, I felt completely calm. Whatever came next, I knew they wouldn't see it coming. And that's when I realized this dinner had just turned into something much bigger than another guilt trip. I let the letter sit there, unopened, the silence growing heavier with every passing second. The letter sat between us like a live grenade, and no one dared to touch it. For a few long seconds, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Emily was the first to break. Naturally, she's never been good with suspense. "Oh, for crying out loud," she said, reaching for the envelope. I put my hand over it before she could grab it. "Patience, Emmy," I said with a little grin, using the nickname she hates. "I promise it's worth the wait." "Don't call me that," she snapped, yanking her hand back. "And why do you have to make everything so dramatic? Just say what it is." Mom looked like she was seconds away from siding with Emily, but instead she leaned back and said, "Whatever this is, I hope it's good news. Lord knows we could use some." That comment hit me sideways. Use some implied there was some ongoing tragedy I wasn't aware of, and I felt that little prickle of suspicion I always get when I think I'm not being told something. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. Mom exchanged a quick glance with Dad, and he sighed. "We didn't want to tell you yet, because you already have enough on your plate," he said. "But, well, your sister's been having a hard time lately. We've been helping her out." Emily straightened up like she'd just been knighted. "I don't know why you make it sound like I'm some charity case," she said, flipping her hair. "It's just a loan." Something in my stomach turned cold. "A loan for what?" Dad's jaw tightened. Emily had some credit card issues. She got behind, and the interest was killing her. We couldn't just sit back and let her ruin her credit. I stared at them, trying to process this. My parents aren't exactly wealthy. Covering Emily's debt would have been a big deal for them. "How much are we talking?" I asked. Mom waved a hand like it wasn't important. "Don't worry about it. It's handled." "No," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I want to know. How much?" Emily crossed her arms, defensive now. "It was only 15,000. It's not like I asked them to do it. They offered." 15,000. My chest felt tight. That was almost exactly what I'd given my parents last year to help fix their roof when they said they couldn't afford the repairs. I'd worked overtime for months to make that happen. "Wait a second," I said slowly, looking from Mom to Dad. "The money I gave you, the roof money, did that go to Emily?" Neither of them said anything, but the look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. "Oh my God," I said, sitting back. "You used the money I gave you for Emily's credit cards?" "It was an emergency," Mom said quickly. "And we did fix the roof eventually." "Eventually?" I said, laughing, but it was the kind of laugh that sounds a little unhinged. "You told me it had to be done immediately because it was leaking into the attic." Dad's face hardened. "We made a judgment call, Peter. Your sister was drowning in debt. What kind of parents would we be if we let her destroy her future?" I stared at him, incredulous. "So you saved her future by lying to me and using me as an ATM?" Emily bristled. "You're so dramatic. It's not like you can't afford it. You're always bragging about how well you're doing." "I have literally never bragged," I shot back. "And that's not the point. The point is I trusted you guys. I gave you that money because you said you needed it, and you spent it on her secret shopping sprees." "They weren't shopping sprees," Emily shouted, her face red now. "I had medical bills too, you know." "Really?" I said, narrowing my eyes. "Because last I checked, you posted pictures from Cancun that same month." Emily's mouth snapped shut, and for once she didn't have a comeback. Mom reached across the table, like she thought she could smooth this over with a comforting gesture, but I pulled back. "You should have told me," I said, my voice quieter now, but way sharper. "You should have asked. Instead, you lied. And now you sit here accusing me of hiding things." "That's not fair," Mom said. "We didn't want to burden you." "You already did," I said louder this time. "You took my money under false pretenses. You made me work myself sick for something you didn't even use it for." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Watch your tone. This is our house, Peter. Don't talk to your mother that way." I pushed my chair back so fast it scraped against the floor. "You know what? Maybe it's better I don't come around. Because every time I do, I find out another little secret no one bothered to tell me." "You're overreacting," Dad said, standing now too. "It's just money." "It's not just money," I shot back. "It's trust. And you broke it." For a moment, no one said anything. My heart was pounding in my ears. Emily stared at her plate like she wished she could disappear. Mom looked like she might cry. Dad just looked furious. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice quiet but cutting. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with being the perfect son, you wouldn't take everything so personally. I felt something in me snap. All the resentment, all the little slights, all the times I'd been made the villain for no reason, it all came boiling up. Perfect son, I said. If that's what you think, then I guess the bar's been buried 6 feet under for a while. I grabbed the letter from the table and stood up. You want to know what this is? Fine. It's the closing paperwork for my house refinance. I was going to surprise you by telling you I paid it off early, because I thought you'd be proud of me. But now, I slid the envelope back into my pocket. Now I think I'll keep that to myself. Mom's face went pale. Peter, don't be like that. Oh, I'm just getting started, I said, my voice calm again, too calm. And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving the three of them in stunned silence behind me. But as I got into my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I realized this wasn't just about one lie or one dinner. This was about every time they'd taken me for granted, every time they'd chosen Emily's comfort over my boundaries. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just hurt. I was planning. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. When I got home that night, the silence in my house felt heavier than usual. Normally, I loved coming back to my place, the one space that was truly mine. But now, even as I shut the door and dropped my keys on the counter, it felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out. I sank onto the couch, staring at nothing, the letter still in my pocket like a lead weight. I should have felt proud. Paying off my house before 30 was something I never thought I'd achieve, but tonight it just felt meaningless. I'd wanted that moment with my family, not for praise, exactly, but just to share a win. And now all I could picture was Dad's clenched jaw, Mom's disappointed look, and Emily's smug face as she defended herself. For the next few days, I went through the motions at work, but my brain was somewhere else entirely. I caught myself zoning out during meetings, replaying the dinner over and over. Every time I thought about it, another detail stung. Like the way Dad said, "It's just money." As if what I'd given them hadn't cost me late nights, skipped vacations, and stress-induced migraines. Or the way Emily had tried to justify her spending like it was noble suffering. By midweek, Mom started calling. At first, I ignored her. Then I finally picked up, mostly because I couldn't stand the thought of my phone buzzing all night again. "Peter," she said immediately, her tone clipped, "this has gone on long enough. You need to come over and talk to your father." I almost laughed. Funny, I don't remember him wanting to talk when I walked out the other night. "He's hurt," she said. "You embarrassed him." That stopped me cold. I embarrassed him? He's the one who admitted to taking my money and lying about what it was for. "You're being selfish," she snapped. "This family has been through enough without you turning everything into drama. Your sister is under a lot of stress right now, and you storming out like that just made everything worse." I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "So we're still pretending she's the victim here?" "She's your sister," Mom said sharply. "And we love you both. We just want everyone to get along." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, lying awake in bed, I realized something. They weren't going to apologize. Not Mom, not Dad, definitely not Emily. As far as they were concerned, I was the one in the wrong for daring to be upset. The thought sat heavy in my chest, like a stone pressing me down. The following weekend, I didn't go to family dinner. Instead, I stayed home, ordered takeout, and watched bad TV until my phone started lighting up. Texts from Mom, then from Dad, then a single, almost taunting message from Emily. "Still sulking? Grow up." I stared at the screen for a long time. I wanted to type something back, but instead, I put my phone face down and sat there in the quiet, letting that mix of anger and sadness wash over me. The next day, I drove out to a trail I used to hike when I was in college. It was the kind of place where you could get lost for hours, and I needed the space. The fall air was crisp, the leaves crunching under my boots, and for the first time all week, I felt like I could actually breathe. I thought about the years leading up to this. Every time I'd been told to take one for the team. Every time Emily had been bailed out of something she got herself into while I was expected to be responsible. I remembered missing a friend's wedding years ago because Mom guilted me into staying home to help Emily move apartments. I remembered Dad praising Emily's bravery when she quit her job on a whim to find herself, while telling me I was lucky to have a steady paycheck, like it had nothing to do with hard work. Somewhere between mile 2 and 3, I stopped by a quiet overlook and just stood there, staring down at the valley below. It was beautiful, but I barely saw it. My mind was on the letter sitting on my kitchen counter at home. I had worked for years to get to this point, to have stability, to have freedom, and now it felt like none of it mattered. For a few weeks, I pulled back completely. No calls, no visits, no family group chat replies. I focused on work, started going to the gym again, cooked meals at home instead of eating takeout every night. I didn't do it to spite them. I did it because I needed to remember who I was when I wasn't constantly defending myself. And yet, every time I saw that letter, I felt this little spark of something I hadn't felt before. Not just hurt, not just anger, something sharper. I started keeping a notebook, just a cheap spiral-bound one I had lying around, and writing down everything. Every time I remembered some favor that had actually been a manipulation, every time I realized I'd been guilted into doing something I didn't want to do, patterns started to emerge. It wasn't just that they had betrayed me this once. This had been happening for years. And slowly, an idea began to form. At first it was small, just a thought about putting some distance between us, maybe skipping Christmas for once. But the more I wrote, the clearer it became. Distance wasn't enough. This wasn't just about avoiding them. This was about reclaiming something I'd been giving away my entire life without realizing it. One night, I sat at my kitchen table with the refinance letter open in front of me. For the first time, I didn't feel sad looking at it. I felt powerful. If they thought I was just going to keep showing up, keep bailing them out, keep playing the role of the good son, they were in for a surprise. The next move had to be careful, quiet, strategic, because whatever came next wasn't going to be about blowing up at a dinner table. This time, I wanted them to feel it. And for the first time since that night, I felt myself smile. The shift started small, so small I don't think anyone but me would have noticed at first. It was in the way I woke up earlier, not with the heaviness of dread in my chest, but with something closer to focus. It was in the way I stopped letting messages from my family set the tone for my day. It was in the way I started saying no, not loudly, not with drama, just calmly, decisively. At work, my productivity shot up. With no emotional hangovers from family dinners weighing me down, I threw myself into my projects. Within a few months, my manager called me into her office. "Peter," she said, grinning, "we've been looking at your numbers. The board is thrilled. How do you feel about taking on a leadership role?" The promotion came with a raise, which meant the first thing I did was set up automatic transfers to my investment account. The version of me from a year ago would have immediately offered to help mom and dad with some house expense or Emily with her next crisis. This version of me didn't even consider it. I started networking more too. Attending industry meetups, grabbing coffee with people I admired, building relationships that had nothing to do with my family and everything to do with who I wanted to be. It was like I'd been living with blinders on, and now suddenly the world was wide open. Outside of work, I took better care of myself. I joined a weekend hiking group and met people who didn't know me as the good son or Emily's little brother. I signed up for a cooking class, partly because I was tired of eating the same 3 dinners and partly because I wanted to try something that was just for me. I even started running again, something I hadn't done since college. The physical changes came slowly, but they came. I lost weight, my posture improved, and one day while shaving, I realized I was smiling at my own reflection. A real smile, not the tight, practiced one I used at family gatherings. My house started to feel different, too. Instead of a quiet place to collapse after work, it became a space I actually enjoyed being in. I bought a secondhand piano and started playing again, filling the rooms with music. I turned the spare bedroom into a study, complete with a proper desk, bookshelves, and a giant corkboard where I organized everything I'd been writing about my family patterns. It might sound petty, but seeing it all laid out, every time they'd guilt me, every time I'd bailed Emily out, every time I'd been told I was too sensitive for speaking up, gave me a sense of clarity I'd never had before. It was like looking at a map of where I'd been and realizing exactly how I'd gotten here. By the time the holidays rolled around, I felt like a completely different person. When Mom called to ask what day I'd be coming for Christmas, I said, "Actually, I won't be making it this year. I'm going on a trip." There was a long pause on the other end. "A trip?" Mom said, like I'd just told her I was joining a space mission. "Yeah, I said, smiling as I packed my bag. Somewhere warm. I've been working hard, and I need a break. Well, that's very selfish, she said sharply. Your sister was counting on you being here. Emily's a grown adult, I said calmly. She can celebrate without me. And then, this was the big moment. I hung up before she could launch into a guilt trip. That trip ended up being the best thing I'd done for myself in years. I went to the coast, stayed in a little rental near the water, and spent the week reading, walking the beach, and talking to strangers who knew nothing about me except what I chose to tell them. No drama, no lectures, no obligations. When I got back, there were 24 unread messages on my phone, ranging from Mom's tearful voicemails to Emily's passive-aggressive texts. Hope you're enjoying yourself, while Mom's worried sick. I read them all once, put the phone down, and then went to play piano for an hour instead of answering. Work was thriving. My manager hinted that I was being considered for a major project that could fast-track me for another promotion. Financially, I was in the best shape of my life. I'd paid off my house, maxed out my retirement accounts, and had enough in savings to start thinking about buying a rental property. That was when the idea clicked into place. I wasn't just gaining power in my personal life. I was in a position to use it strategically. Because as much as I was enjoying the peace of staying distant, I couldn't ignore that simmering ember of anger that hadn't gone out since that night at the dinner table. This wasn't just about living well. This was about making sure I was never put in that position again. Never lied to, never guilt, never treated like a backup plan. I started being even more deliberate. I talked to a financial advisor about putting some assets into a trust, something that would make it impossible for anyone to claim they had a right to my money down the line. I updated my will. I even started documenting some of the things my parents had said over the years about money, just in case things ever got messy. Meanwhile, I kept up the appearance of being civil. I answered calls once in a while, but I kept the conversations light and short. No personal details, no invitations. When Mom asked if I'd be coming by for Sunday dinner, I told her politely but firmly that I was busy, which was true. Busy building something that, for once, belonged entirely to me. By spring, I felt unstoppable. My life was organized, my finances were solid, and my confidence had grown so much that even Emily's texts barely registered as more than mild annoyances. And yet, when I looked at the corkboard in my study, I could see there was still one thing left to do. I didn't just want distance. I wanted closure. And the best way to get it would require careful timing, the right setting, and, most importantly, the letter that started all of this. It was time to stop playing defense and make my move. The plan was coming together in my head, step by step. And the thought of finally confronting them on my terms made me feel something I hadn't felt in months. Excited. This time, I wasn't walking into a dinner waiting to be blindsided. This time, I'd be the one setting the table. I didn't rush into it. That was the first difference between the old me and the new me. A year ago, I would have let my anger do the steering, marched back into their house, yelled, maybe thrown the letter down on the table just to make them feel guilty. But now, I had patience. I had leverage. And, most importantly, I had options. The first step in my plan wasn't flashy at all. It was information. I started paying closer attention whenever my parents talked. I'd pick up the phone when Mom called and let her vent about bills or gossip about relatives, listening carefully for the things she didn't mean to say. The sigh when she mentioned utilities, the pause when she talked about the cabin they liked to visit up north. Little clues started to build a picture of their financial situation, and from the sound of it, things weren't as stable as they pretended. Then, one Saturday, I ran into my Uncle Mark at the grocery store. Mark is Dad's younger brother and one of the few people in the family who's always been straight with me. He's not one for drama, which is probably why I trust him. We got to chatting, and out of nowhere he said, "You know, your dad's been talking about selling some property. Something about the old lake lot your grandparents left him." I blinked. What? I thought that land was untouchable, like family legacy untouchable. Mark shrugged. "Yeah, well, I guess things change. He said if he sells it, he wants to keep it quiet so you and Emily don't fight about it." That stuck with me for days. The lake lot wasn't just any property. It was where my grandparents used to take us every summer when we were kids. We'd fish off the dock, roast marshmallows by the fire, swim until we were pruny. That place was one of the few genuinely good memories I had of all of us together. And Dad was going to sell it, quietly, behind my back. I didn't say anything to my family right away. But the idea kept rolling around in my head. If they were willing to sell something that meant so much, what else were they willing to do? More importantly, what could I do with that knowledge? That's when the idea of buying the lot myself hit me. Not just to save it, but to make a point that I could protect what mattered without their approval. I called a real estate lawyer and asked about the process. To my surprise, he said it might actually be easier than I thought. If your father owns the property outright, he said, and you make him an offer directly, you could close quickly without going through a public listing. Perfect. While I was at it, I had the lawyer look over the documents I'd been collecting, my house payoff letter, my financial plan, everything. We set up a living trust, just like I'd been thinking, with ironclad language about where my assets would go. The more I worked on it, the more secure I felt. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from family dinners, but stayed just close enough not to arouse suspicion. When Mom called one afternoon to ask if I could help Emily just this once with a car payment, I smiled and said, "Sorry, I can't. My budget's tight right now." It wasn't tight, not even close. But the sound of her surprised silence on the other end was enough to confirm what I'd suspected. They'd come to see my generosity as a given, not a gift. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Emily had gotten a new credit card and was already racking up charges. The old me might have jumped in to warn her or even offer advice. The new me just wrote it down in my notebook. At work, my influence grew. The major project my boss hinted about, I got it, and I crushed it. By the time the quarterly reviews rolled around, I was sitting in a boardroom presenting to executives, and one of them pulled me aside afterward to say, "You have leadership potential. We should talk about where you want to be in 5 years." That night, I opened a bottle of wine and toasted myself at the kitchen table. Every win felt like another brick in the wall I was building between my new life and the old one. Then, almost like fate, Mom called and asked me to come to a family dinner because, as she put it, there are some things we all need to talk about. I could hear the tension in her voice. This wasn't just another guilt trip, something was brewing. "Sure," I said casually. "When?" "This Sunday," she said. 6 o'clock. Perfect timing. I spent the next few days preparing, not just mentally but physically. I gathered all the documents I might need, the refinance letter, the trust paperwork, even a printout of the preliminary offer I drafted for the lake lot. I didn't know if I'd use them all, but I wanted to be ready. I even bought a new suit. Not flashy, but sharp. I wanted to walk into that house looking like someone they couldn't dismiss as the kid brother. Someone who had his life completely under control. On Sunday afternoon, before heading over, I drove past the lake lot. It was quiet, the water perfectly still, reflecting the setting sun. I sat there for a while, remembering being 10 years old and catching my first fish with Dad cheering beside me. For a moment, I almost felt guilty for what I was planning. Almost. But then I thought about that dinner months ago, about the way they'd lied to me, used me, and made me feel like I was the problem. And I knew this wasn't just revenge. This was balance. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, the plan was crystal clear in my mind. Whatever talk they had planned, I was ready. And this time, I wasn't the one walking in unprepared. I was walking in with the power, and I intended to use it. I arrived right on time that Sunday, pulling into my parents' driveway just as the sun dipped low enough to cast long, golden shadows across the lawn. There were already 2 other cars parked out front, Dad's truck and Emily's little silver hatchback, which meant I was the last to arrive. For a second, I sat in my car with the engine off, my fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel. My heart was steady, not pounding like it had been that night months ago. This time, I wasn't the ambushed party. This time, I had the ammunition. I stepped out, straightened my jacket, and grabbed the envelope from the passenger seat. Not just the refinance letter this time, but a tidy little stack of papers I'd been preparing over the past few weeks. The evening air was cool, the kind that wakes you up and sharpens your senses. I felt calm, almost light, as I rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door, her smile tight but polite. "Peter, good, you made it." "Of course," I said smoothly, stepping inside. Wouldn't miss family dinner. The dining room table was already set, the good plates out, the kind they only used on holidays. Emily was scrolling on her phone, looking bored until she saw me, at which point her eyebrows shot up. "Wow, look who actually showed up. Miracles do happen. Good to see you too, Emmy," I said with an easy grin. deliberately using the nickname again just to watch her glare. We ate mostly in silence at first. It felt oddly formal, like everyone was waiting for someone to speak first. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. So, he said, we thought it was time we all sat down and talked about the future. The future? I repeated, taking a sip of water. Sounds serious. Mom folded her hands on the table. Your father and I aren't getting any younger, Peter. And we've been thinking about, well, what happens when we're gone? The house, the cabin. The cabin. I interrupted, my tone light but pointed. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Yes, we've been considering selling the lake lot, but before we do anything, we wanted to get everyone on the same page. I let the words hang there, watching Emily out of the corner of my eye. She didn't look surprised, which told me she already knew. Interesting. That's thoughtful, I said finally, setting my fork down. I appreciate you looping me in before making a decision. Dad nodded, relieved, clearly thinking this was going to be an easy conversation. Good. We were worried you'd be upset. Oh, I am, I said calmly, sliding the envelope onto the table. But not for the reasons you think. Mom frowned. What's this? Paperwork, I said, leaning back. I've been doing some thinking myself. About the future. Emily rolled her eyes. Here we go. I ignored her and began to lay out the documents one by one, slow and deliberate. First, the letter showing my house had been paid off. This, I said, is what I was going to tell you about months ago, before that lovely dinner where you accused me of hiding things. Mom's eyes widened. Peter, you paid it off? Yes, I said simply. I worked hard, I saved, and I did it early. And I was proud of it. Until I found out the money I gave you for your roof actually went to Emily's debt. Emily bristled. I said I was sorry. You never said you were sorry. I cut in, my voice still calm. You said it wasn't a big deal, that I could afford it. Peter, Dad started, but I held up a hand. I'm not here to rehash that fight. I'm here to make things clear moving forward. I laid out the next document, the trust paperwork. This is a legal trust I've set up. Everything I own, my house, my savings, my investments, is now in here. Which means if anything happens to me, it doesn't automatically go to anyone by default. It goes exactly where I want it to. Mom's lips pressed together. Peter, no one was trying to take anything from you. Weren't you? I asked mildly. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like my hard work has been treated like a safety net for everyone else's choices. And that ends tonight. Emily scoffed. So what? You're cutting us off. I smiled faintly. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. Finally, I pulled out the last set of papers, the offer letter for the lake lot. I slid it across the table toward Dad. Uncle Mark told me you were planning to sell this place quietly. So here's my offer. I'll buy it. Full asking price. No public listing. No haggling. You get your money. I keep the place in the family, and no one can say I didn't step up. For the first time all night, Dad actually looked stunned. He picked up the paper, scanned it, then looked at me. You're serious. Dead serious, I said. But there's one condition. Emily groaned. Of course there is. I looked her dead in the eye. Once this deal closes, no more guilt trips. No more calls about car payments or credit card bills. If you get yourself into a hole, you climb out yourself. And if anyone tries to pressure me into bailing her out again, I walk away completely from all of this. The silence that followed was absolute. I could see Mom's face working as she tried to decide whether to be angry or impressed. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't look furious, more thoughtful, like he was realizing just how much leverage I'd taken back. Emily, predictably, was the first to explode. You can't just hold the family hostage like this. Funny, I said with a small smile. I was about to say the same thing to you. Her mouth opened, then closed, and for once, she didn't have a comeback. Dad finally set the paper down. This is a lot to take in, he said. Take your time, I said, standing and gathering the rest of my documents. The offer stands for 30 days. After that, I'll take my money elsewhere. And with that, I put the envelope back under my arm, thanked them politely for dinner, and headed for the door. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. This wasn't the shouting match of before. This was quiet, clean, controlled. For the first time in my life, I'd taken back the power at that table, and I hadn't even raised my voice. But I knew this wasn't the end. The real fallout was still coming, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next. The days after that dinner were strangely quiet, almost too quiet. No late-night phone calls from Mom, no guilt-tripping texts from Emily, not even one of Dad's gruff voicemails. It was as if my entire family had gone into a stunned silence, processing the fact that I had just flipped the script on them. At first, I wondered if maybe they were just cooling off. But then, about a week later, I got a call from Dad. "Peter," he said, his voice measured, almost cautious. "Your mother and I talked. We're prepared to accept your offer." I didn't let my satisfaction show. "Good," I said simply. "I'll have my lawyers send over the final paperwork. We can close within 2 weeks." There was a pause on the other end. "You really mean what you said about Emily, don't you?" "Yes," I said, not missing a beat. "This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about ending a pattern that's been eating away at all of us for years. I'm done being the fixer. If Emily needs help, she can figure it out herself, or not. That's between her and her bank, not me." Dad let out a long breath. "All right," he said finally. "We'll respect that." That was the first moment I realized just how much had shifted. My father, the man who had spent my entire life framing everything as his way or the highway, was conceding to my terms. The next 2 weeks moved quickly. The paperwork was signed, the payment transferred, and just like that, the lake lot was mine. Standing on that land after the deal closed was surreal. The air smelled like pine and childhood summers. But this time there was no weight on my shoulders. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest on borrowed family property. I felt like the rightful steward of something worth protecting. When I told Mom the deal was finalized, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Your father and I are glad it's staying with you," she said. "Your grandparents would have wanted that." "Thanks, Mom," I said, and for once I meant it. But of course, not everyone took it so gracefully. A few days later, Emily showed up at my house. Unannounced, something she hadn't done since I first moved in. She stood on my porch with her arms crossed, looking like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Can I help you?" I asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. She didn't waste time. "You made Mom cry," she said. "No," I said evenly. "I set boundaries. Mom's reaction to those boundaries isn't my responsibility." Emily rolled her eyes. "God, listen to yourself. You sound like one of those self-help books." I smiled faintly. "Thank you. That's actually kind of a compliment." Her scowl deepened. "Do you know how selfish you sound? You have all this money, all this success, and you're just going to sit there and watch me struggle." "I'm not going to watch anything," I said calmly. "I'm going to live my life. What you do with yours is up to you." That clearly wasn't the answer she wanted. "You think this makes you better than me?" she snapped. "No," I said quietly. "It just makes me free." For a moment, she just stood there, glaring, like she was searching for something sharp enough to hurt me. But whatever she wanted to say never came. She turned on her heel, stalked back to her car, and peeled out of the driveway. That was the last time Emily came to my house uninvited. In the months that followed, everything felt different. Not perfect. There were still awkward phone calls, still little moments where old habits tried to creep back in. But the power dynamic had shifted permanently. When Mom called now, she asked how I was doing first. When Dad needed help with something, he asked politely, not like it was a given. And Emily? Well, let's just say I saw a lot fewer photos of expensive weekend trips on her social media once she realized there wouldn't be a bailout waiting for her if she got in over her head. As for me, I kept building. I bought a small canoe for the lake lot and started spending weekends out there, inviting friends over for bonfires and fishing trips. The place became mine in every sense, not just legally, but emotionally. Every time I stood on the dock watching the sun set, I felt that knot in my chest loosen a little more. One evening, months later, Mom and Dad came out to see the lot for the first time since the sale. They were quieter than usual, walking slowly along the shore, taking it all in. "Finally," Dad said, "you've taken good care of it." "Thanks," I said. Mom nodded, her eyes shining a little. "We were wrong, you know, about a lot of things." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Instead, I just said, "I know." And for the first time in years, we sat by the fire together without any tension, just the sound of the crackling wood and the water lapping against the dock. Driving home that night, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about building something stronger, something that couldn't be knocked over by guilt trips or manipulations. I had taken back my trust, my peace, and my future, and in the process, I taught them how to respect me. As I pulled into my driveway and shut off the car, I smiled to myself. Because this time, When I put my keys down on the counter, there was no heaviness, no resentment. Just a quiet, steady certainty that I had finally set myself free.